name is Deborah Gonzalez, and I'm your instructor for Solo Practice University on social media and the law. Today's session is all about social media and online disclaimers. And those are online disclaimers from the point of view of the attorney who's using social media, but it's also going to be very important in terms of your clients if they have an online presence and what disclaimers they may need, okay? So we're going to go through some disclaimers in terms of websites and then specific social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and AVVO. So let's begin. First thing I want to talk about is our websites. Each of our websites should have a disclaimer, okay, as attorneys to make sure of a couple of things. First of all, the idea that we're not forming attorney-client relationships, but also that the information that we provide online in our websites should not be construed as legal advice, but for educational purposes only. An example that I can give you is the own disclaimer that I have on my website, law2sm.com. And here is a strategic decision that you will make. Some websites will have a 1 or 2 line disclaimer on the bottom of each of their pages. If your disclaimer is a little bit longer, you might decide to take the strategy that I did, and that was I put a disclaimer tab in the bottom of my website so that I can have the full disclaimer on its own page and people can see it and acknowledge it there. Okay? My website talks about not only what I may put, but also the fact that I might have some guest authors or guest bloggers who will also put some information out there for those who view my website. So just to read you the opening paragraph of my disclaimer, it goes like this. Law2sm.com and contributing authors offer the materials on this website for informational purposes only. The information is not offered as consulting, legal, or advice of any type and should not be relied on as such. Okay? So that's what I was talking about, making sure that people understand that this is not legal advice. Okay? It also goes on to talk about third-party material. Some of the stuff that we do online in social media platforms actually ask for our users or our viewers to then comment back on some of the things that we've put there. And this is what we consider third-party content, okay, or third-party generated content. And we want to make sure that we're not liable for something that somebody may put up that would either be defamatory or just offend somebody else or be copyright infringement. So you want to make sure you put that into your disclaimer as well, that you're not responsible for that kind of third-party generated content. Okay. One of the other things that you can say in your disclaimer for your website is that it does not create an attorney-client relationship, and also you can make the suggestion that they actually seek an actual attorney or to set up an appointment with you to go over their particular legal issues. Now let's look at our next social media platform, which is LinkedIn, which is our professional social media platform. And I want you to take a look at the bio section when you put in your narrative of who you are and where they ask you to list that specialties section, okay? And again, I had mentioned this in one of our previous sessions. By the model rules, attorneys cannot specialize. They can focus on certain areas, but they cannot specialize. Well, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, what you're going to see is a disclaimer right on top. The first line in my specialties will say, as an attorney, these are my focus areas, not specialties. Okay? And that one line keeps me in line with the model rules. Now, if LinkedIn was our professional social media networking site, the next one that I want to go to is Twitter. Okay? Now, if you remember, Twitter is that microblogging site. You've got 140 characters to put out a tweet or to dispense information, and you have about 160 characters to actually put up a profile or to make it interesting as to why people would follow you. On my Twitter profile, you'll see that I actually have added a disclaimer, and I won't take ownership for the creativity or originality of this disclaimer. I actually found it from looking at another attorney's bio. and it's called Tweets Are Not Legal Advice. That's all I've added after I talked a little bit about myself, is that tweets are not legal advice. And it's important because right now there are a lot of questions about the status of a tweet. For example, can a tweet be copyrighted? Can it be protected as intellectual property? How original are tweets? Okay? But since a lot of times what professional attorneys may use Twitter for is to send out links or information about specific cases or specific trends that are happening in the practice area. So it's very important to have a disclaimer that it doesn't relate to legal advice at all. Okay? Now let's go to one that is Facebook, our social life online, if you remember. And Facebook, you know, having over 800 million users means that there is a lot of potential for individuals to actually look at the information that you have there, especially if it's not a personal page, but a company fan page, which are much more public than the personal pages where you can set privacy settings and only certain people can see them. But on Facebook, if you have a fan page, it's also a good idea to have a disclaimer tab that individuals can go to. Now, part of this disclaimer, there's two ways to do it. Either sort of a general disclaimer, the way that we talked about on our website, or you can do something like CNN iReport. And what they did is they put up a series of what they call community guidelines to help guide people as they use that forum of what can be posted, what's expected in terms of behavior online by individuals who are using this and who may not. And I just want to go over with you a few of their guidelines because I think they're great ideas for anybody who's going to have some kind of interactive forum in social media presence. So what I want to do is I want to go over a little bit about CNN's community guidelines because I think it has some great starting points for those of us who want to be a little bit interactive in this field. They begin with, first of all, the purpose. Why do they have this forum? What is it that they're looking to accomplish with this particular forum, and what should the forum be used for or not? Okay. They also have their second rule, which says, be nice. So in other words, be respectful about what's happening out there, okay? Their third rule is be thoughtful, be truthful, and be relevant, okay? So very important is the idea that don't just put up something just to put it up there, but really think about what it is that you're contributing to the conversation as you're putting that out there in that forum. Their fourth rule says, no way, no how. Now, there are certain things that they just will not allow end users to put on their forums, okay? Things that, as they say, they will not tolerate. And let me just read you that list that they have here. Obscenities, threats, hate speech, material that's ethically or racially offensive, abusive comments, and spam, to name a few. Okay, notice that they didn't make that the only list out there. They've actually put this includes, but is not limited to. Now, all of these items that they list there, obscenity, threats, hate speech, you know, all of these deal with the issues of discrimination. They deal with public disruption. And so these are really important that they put out there from the very beginning. We're not going to tolerate these, and we're actually going to take them off the site. In fact, what CNN does is they've hired a third party to come in and moderate the forum. So it's not even CNN employees that go through this and take out the comments so that CNN won't then be liable for being racist or biased or any of those things, but actually a third-party company that they hired, okay? They also talk about how that gets moderated, and then they end with the last rule saying that this is a work in progress. In other words, they're still learning, as are all of we, and if a end user may have any suggestions, to please contact them. So you can find these CNN community guidelines on their CNN iReport, I-R-E-P-O-R-T, and take a look at those guidelines. And it's just a great starting point for the discussion of having guidelines or disclaimers right on your site as well. Okay. So now the last one that I want to talk about is AVVO, AVVO.com. And AVVO is the idea of a lawyer ranking type of social media platform where individuals can go and try to find an attorney to help them with a particular legal case if they have one. Okay, there are profiles on this, but the disclaimer that I want to talk to you about is not necessarily a disclaimer on your profile, but a disclaimer when you're engaging on AVVO. AVVO gives attorneys the opportunity to answer legal questions that have been put up by the public. Okay? One of the things to keep in mind is that when you answer those questions, along with your answer, add a little disclaimer every time you answer a question that basically states that it's not legal advice and that you're not forming an attorney-client relationship just because you are answering their question. Really important. So if you are involved in AVVO, you probably want to go online, take a look at the question and answer section, and see how some other attorneys have put in that disclaimer as they answer these questions to make sure that there is no confusion on the part of the person asking the question as to what kind of relationship is established just by answering a question. The other thing that makes these disclaimers so important is that you also don't want to be accused of unauthorized practice of law in a jurisdiction that's not your own, because these questions come from individuals all over the United States. So even though I'm registered in Georgia and New York, there might be a question that I can give some guidance to from a person who's written from California, but I'm not registered in California. So you have to be careful that you're not then, just because you answer a question, are subject to that jurisdiction because you're practicing law without being licensed in that jurisdiction. Okay, so I know that seems a lot and a lot of verbiage and legalese when it comes to putting our profiles and the disclaimers that we need as we work in social media. But one thing to keep in mind is that some of your own clients are going to need these kind of disclaimers and these kind of community guidelines, especially if they are in regulated industries like pharmaceuticals, financial, healthcare. They have their own regulations that they need to be looked at in terms of what needs to be put into those disclaimers, okay? So it's something to be on the lookout for as you do your due diligence and help your clients with social media and their online presence. Thank you.